Hey there, curious history buffs. Have you heard the legend of the ancient race of giants of Nevada? Yes, I'm talking about actual giants that allegedly lived thousands of years ago. Now I know what you're thinking. Giants, really? Well, archaeological finds add fuel to this debate too. And here's where it gets interesting. Lovelock Cave was indeed used as a burial site, and some of the remains found there are much larger than average human bones. The cave is by the Humboldt Sink in western Nevada. It was once part of an enormous lake, which eventually dried up, leaving a number of smaller ones, including the Humboldt Sink. The cave became the home of the Site-Ka tribe. According to the legend, these red-haired giants were so big that they had to be buried in the cave itself. Indeed, later on, archaeologists discovered 8 to 10 foot tall skeletons. This legend started to unfold when a mining engineer named John T. Reed talked to the locals in 1886. Once Reed saw the cave, he knew he was onto something. The news spread soon, but the cave was attracting another type of attention too. The deposits of a fertilizer known as guano were discovered inside the cave. So a mining company began excavating the precious resource in 1911 and soon shipped more than 250 tons of the fertilizer to San Francisco. Unfortunately, some of the human remains and artifacts were neglected and lost in the mining process. This led to an official excavation in 1912 and 1924. After the top layer of guano had been mined, strange objects started to surface. Around the area, the earliest evidence of human habitation dates back about 4,000 years. The Lovelock culture lasted for some 3,000 years, and they left us with 10,000 stunning artifacts. The pits in the cave were like a series of time capsules hidden at different depths. Archaeologists determined the age of each pit by its depth. It turns out that many different groups used the cave for storage over a really long time, and the things they stored there give us a really cool glimpse into their cultures. It's like a giant ancient storage unit full of hidden treasures. What have the researchers found besides the giant bones, you might ask? Some other bodies were mummified using a method similar to the one applied by ancient Egyptians. These remains also had something in common with the bodies discovered as far south as Lake Titicaca. Both mummies had some red hair. Yet, there are scientists who believe this reddish hue is the result of the interaction with the environment in which the bodies stayed. So, while the story of the red-haired giants may be a wild and intriguing tale, not everyone is convinced. Some experts believe that the bones found in Lovelock Cave are simply the remains of prehistoric animals, like mammoths or sloths. But others insist that there's something more to the story. Other relics, such as finely crafted baskets and exquisite duck decoys made from tule fibers, were also found there. In any case, this cave is worth the attention it gets. By the way, you can still visit this cave today and see the pits of different depths with your own eyes. But let me tell you one thing. It's in a hot, dry, and isolated place. Archaeologists have made another discovery that seems to be straight out of a legend. They think they found the palace of the one and only Odysseus, who was the legendary Greek king of Ithaca and the hero of Homer's epic poem. Move over, Indiana Jones. We've got some real-life adventure happening here from around 1300 BCE. Apparently, this is the only palace mentioned in Homer's epic poems that hasn't been found. The excavations have been made on the Ionian Islands, and the view from the ruins found on the island of Ithaca are exactly as described in the Odyssey, says the professor who led the excavation team. Known to the ancient Romans as Ulysses, the Greek hero took 10 years to return home to Ithaca after the fall of Troy. For many years, Homer's other epic, called the Iliad, which tells the story of the protracted siege of Troy by the Greeks, was regarded as a myth too. But then, in the 1870s, Troy was rediscovered in modern-day Turkey's Çanakkale city. So, if they found Troy, who's to say they couldn't find Odysseus's home? The researchers were following Homer's words as a roadmap. The excavation site has a building complex with 2 levels. It has important finds, such as storerooms and workshops, a complicated drainage system, and fragments of pottery. It also has a well from the 8th century BCE, which is around the time when Odysseus is believed to have been the king. Yet, not everyone is convinced that the team has actually discovered the home of Odysseus. A British researcher named Robert Biddlestone insists that Homer's description of ancient Ithaca isn't very similar to the island that now has its name, and that Odysseus's kingdom was actually on the Isle of Cephalonia. However, Italian archaeologist Adriano La Regina might have a more realistic approach to this debate. He says that whether this find has a connection to Ulysses or not, what's more important is the discovery of this royal palace. Once upon a time, in a land far away, the Klamath Indians spread a legend about the creation of Crater Lake. Okay, maybe this land is not that far away, and it still exists. You can find it in south central Oregon, in the western United States. Anyway, the legend has it that this lake was formed in a vicious battle between 2 volcanoes, Mount Mazama and Mount Shasta. Then the spirits of Earth and the Sky, which are Lao, who ruled the below world, and Skell, the chief of the above world, joined the fight. It turned into a geological drama. During the battle, darkness veiled the land. The fight was over when Mount Mazama collapsed and sent Lao back into the underworld. Then the rain filled the pit and created a lake in the place where the mountain had once stood. Flash forward to our time. Scientists have discovered that Mount Mazama did erupt 7,700 years ago. Artifacts found in the area prove that the legend indeed contains some details about the explosion. The tale says that red-hot rocks were flying through the sky. This happened during the volcanic eruption that caused the mountain to collapse. This created the volcanic caldera, which later on got filled with water. What makes this legend came true story unusual is how long it has existed. According to researchers, these types of verbal stories lose their credibility within 600 to 700 years. That's why the legend about the creation of Crater Lake is so unique. So many generations, for hundreds of years, have been accurately passing down the information. This volcanic crater lake is now in a national park. It's famous for its deep blue color. The water in it is extremely clear. If you visit it today, the water you'll see won't be the same as for someone who will visit the place 250 years later. Because there are no rivers flowing into or out of the lake, the existing water evaporates and the lake gets filled again by rain and snowfall. Basically, every 250 years, the water is replaced. Plus, this lake is almost 2,000 feet deep, which makes it the deepest lake in the United States. Swimming is okay in the lake, but there's only one legal and safe trail to get to the shore. There are other activities, such as fishing and boat tours. Shared human experiences, such as birth, marriage, and aging, may explain why certain tales are shared globally. Similar struggles and obstacles faced by humans around the world generate similar themes in traditional stories about love, parenting, and mortality. So, do you have legends or tales you've heard of from your grandparents? Who knows? Maybe your ancestors too witnessed a cool historical event. Imagine you get to be an archaeologist for the day. You'll travel the world to solve the mystery of long-lost civilizations that disappeared without a trace. Grab your chisel and fedora, and let's go. You arrive at the American Southwest, where an ancient mystery is waiting to be solved. You make your way to Chaco Canyon, just outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's hot and dry in this deserted area. You're here to visit the ancient ruins of the Anasazi people. It's said that they were a thriving civilization that met a mysterious end. You hike a few miles before you begin to make out the shape of dwellings, constructions built of stone in the middle of the canyon. This is Pueblo Bonito, a 10th century complex that contains as many as 800 rooms, and stands over 5 stories tall. The buildings are beautiful and made from sandstone. To access the complex, its inhabitants built a 400-mile network of roads, some of them 30 feet wide. You can't wrap your head around the fact that it was built so long ago. Everything looks so well preserved. The Anasazi reigned over the so-called Four Corners region from 100 CE to around 1600 CE. During this time, they built a civilization that sprawled over 30,000 square miles, including Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, and Arizona. Standing inside a huge kiva, an underground ceremonial chamber, you wonder what happened to the Anasazi people. Scientists have analyzed tree rings and found out that the Anasazi population lived through a period of great drought. The drought is believed to have lasted 23 years, and there was possibly no rain at all during this time. This definitely affected their livelihood, from malnutrition to battles over food and resources. But was it enough to make 30,000 people flee their homes? Researchers say these people left their homes with their belongings still in place. Ladles were left in ceramic bowls. Granaries were full of supplies. It was as if they intended to return, but never had the chance to come back. For many years, archaeologists have believed that the drought was the reason for the disappearance of this thriving society. But there's other evidence that shows a different story. Anthropologists say that the ancestral Puebloans, as they are also called, were an exemplary population. They were peaceful and lived together in harmony. But that's not what their architecture shows. They isolated themselves from the rest of the world by building their settlements so high on top of cliffs. And they built walls and other security structures in order to protect themselves. What were they so afraid of? Recently, archaeologists began to study bone fossils of the ancestral Puebloans, and they found evidence that suggests that toward the end of their civilization, things might have gotten pretty bad. Evidence shows that local leaders were ruling using fear-based methods. Severe punishment started to be inflicted on those who did not follow their strict rules. Why this happened is still a mystery, and you might need many other excavation trips to find out the truth. It's lucky that your next destination is really close by. Still in New Mexico, you'll visit the Blackwater Draw. It's a national prehistoric site that holds the story of the Clovis people. You're shocked to find out that the Clovis are possibly the oldest humans to have inhabited the U.S. They were the first humans to allegedly cross the Bering Strait and follow the ice-free trails down to the U.S.'s southern plains. Try to picture what this area looked like when the Clovis people roamed this land. A huge spring-fed lake with mammoths, giant sloths, saber-toothed tigers, and bison much bigger than the ones we have today wandering around. The archaeological site you're visiting shows that the Clovis population were big game hunters. You're able to identify the bones of several mammoths and even the stone tools that our prehistoric ancestors used to hunt them. Some of these date back to 13,000 years ago, aka the end of the last ice age. You're presented with two possible theories on the disappearance of the Clovis population. It's possible that during the final 1,500 years of the last ice age, changes in climate caused a shortage of food. Scientists also believe that this situation was worsened by overhunting. Another theory suggests that a large meteor hit North America, and this was enough to alter the climate and make the Clovis people migrate southward to try to survive. But the truth is, there's no evidence that any of that happened. Next, you'll fly to the Pacific Ocean, to the mysterious Easter Island. This place has left us with many questions, from the building of 13-foot-high face statues to the sudden disappearance of the Rapa Nui people who inhabited the area. You approach the island at Anakina, a white sandy beach on the island's northern shore. Researchers believe this area was one of the first settlements of the Rapa Nui. You could say you're standing at the end of the world, as you're over 3,000 miles away from South America and 1,000 miles away from the nearest island. Around 800 CE, when the first humans arrived, the the island was an oasis. Today, the area is mostly deserted. You get your first clue on the fall of the Rapa Nui from an excavation pit you open at the beach. There's clear evidence of human presence: charcoal, tools, and bones, some of them belonging to rats. Bingo! When humans arrived at Easter Island, they brought along rodent companions. They probably didn't know this at the time, but these rodents would contribute largely to their demise. Rats love palm trees, which helped to deforest the natural vegetation of the island gradually over the years. But there's another clue. Looking into genetic data, you discover that South Americans came into contact with the Rapa Nui around 1722. What might have happened to this population is the same that happened to other more isolated groups. The contact with foreign groups brought about diseases that possibly led to the end of the Rapa Nui. To finish off your trip, you're headed to Cambodia. The country was once home to the Great Khmer Empire from the 9th century CE to the 15th century CE. The ruins of this place are magnificent. Your main excavation site is the Plains of Angkor, built alongside the Mekong River. This huge site was the most important Khmer city at the time. Just FYI, Angkor actually means capital city in the Khmer language. The Khmer were able to build a huge network of roads connecting Angkor with the rest of the empire. And it's believed that up to 1 million people were spread throughout the Khmer Empire at its peak days. It was the largest pre-industrial city in the entire world. It's comparable in size to modern-day Los Angeles, just so you can get an idea. The Khmers were also master builders and engineers. They managed to build a complex irrigation system that helped their rice farming through the centuries. And to connect their cities, they built almost 500 miles of intricate highways and bridges. Oh, and not to mention the complex architecture of their religious buildings, such as Angkor Wat, one of today's most visited tourist sites in Cambodia. It took over 30 years to build, and it spreads over almost 500 acres. Back in the day, its towers were probably decorated with gold, but today, the site is a maze of vine-covered temples. Like your fellow researchers that came here before you, you're unsure of what caused this civilization to be wiped off the map. One possible guess has to do with the climate in the region. Strong monsoons might have caused massive floods and severe damage to the infrastructure, especially to the water system the Khmer people heavily relied on to survive. But another reason could have been regional conflict and immigration. Toward the end of the 15th century, the empire started to decline in numbers, and this could have weakened its strong power. You might not go home with many answers, but you've certainly learned a lot, huh?
The unanswered mysteries surrounding ancient civilizations have been a source of inspiration for many conspiracy theorists. In fact, some of these mysteries are so interesting that many of us either already believe them or would like to. One thing is for sure though, none of those thousands of conspiracy theories have ever been, classified. Or have they? We're all aware that the CIA has done some questionable things throughout history for the sake of national security, but you wouldn't expect a book to be both a national and international threat. The CIA recently declassified parts of a book that talks about lost ancient civilizations and the catastrophic events that made them vanish thousands of years ago. This mysterious book was written in 1963 by a guy named Chan Thomas, and it was going to be published by Emerson House in 1965 until the CIA got involved. For some mysterious reason, they classified the book, and it was never released to the public until recently. But here's where it gets interesting. The book was declassified in 2013 due to the Freedom of Information Act, but it wasn't released to the public until 2016. And what was released truly raises a few questions. The original version of this document was 284 pages long, but the PDF essay that was released was heavily censored, with just 57 pages, which makes it 1/5 of the whole document. The pages were edited before they were released to the public in such a way that you wouldn't even notice that the other pages were missing. Now, no one really knows why this book was classified in the first place, but it has some interesting content from what I've gathered. The author of the book had quite the imagination and a huge love for ancient civilizations. And even though what he had to say is very thought-provoking, some of it is just bizarre. He believes that our planet is locked into a never-ending cycle of pole shifts and Earth crust displacements that are responsible for the mass extinctions of many civilizations which existed more than 6,000 years ago, even before the Sumerians. He believed that these events caused more damage to the Earth than meteors, and he bases this theory on a few artifacts that exist around the world, but weren't really noticed until recently. But I'll get into that in a bit. Those mass extinctions that the book talks about include the end of the Ice Age, when huge 2-mile-thick ice sheets disappeared from northern Europe, Northern America, and Canada, and caused 100 species to go extinct. And here's how the author illustrates his hypothesis. He believes that there was a geomagnetic pole shift which caused catastrophic changes to both the atmosphere and the Earth's crust, resulting in the extinction of many civilizations over time. Now, even though the geomagnetic pole shift is a real thing, it doesn't just happen overnight. It happens really slowly, only about every few 100,000 years, according to scientists. But it's a bit more complicated than it sounds. It is a well-known fact that the North Pole is somewhere above Alaska, and the South Pole is close to the middle of Antarctica. Now, these are the geographic poles, and they'll always be north and south. However, the Earth's magnetic poles flipped a few 100,000 years ago. So if you had a compass, let's say 700,000 years ago, it would instead point south and show you the Antarctic. But the author of the book has a different theory. He believed that the flip of the north and south magnetic poles doesn't happen every few 100,000 years, but every 12,000 years, and that this flip occurs in just a few hours, causing a catastrophic apocalypse. He thinks this happens as a result of an explosion inside the Earth's core. This explosion causes the magnetic poles to flip, but it also causes the Earth's crust to move. According to the book, due to these catastrophic events, a lot of the Earth's continents that were submerged underwater rose above sea level in just a few hours. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The author also states that the Peruvian Andes were beneath the ocean before the last pole shift. And even though it seems far-fetched, since the Andes are approximately 22,000 feet above sea level, there was evidence to support that claim in the late 80s. Scientists found whale bones and fossils that are said to be millions of years old on top of the Andes and the Himalayan mountains. It's also suggested in the book that the deep freeze the Earth went through during the Younger Dryas event caused the Gulf Stream to be disrupted, and he points to some interesting evidence to support that theory. Frozen mammoths were found trapped in blocks of ice with food still in their mouths. Now, this is a true mystery, because freezing cold weather is in their nature, and they were among the few animals that could truly survive in the Ice Age. So, what could have caused them to freeze so quickly? Kinda makes you go, doesn't it? The document describes the Great Pyramid of Giza as a true enigma as well. The Pyramid of Giza is made out of 2.5 million stone blocks that are placed on top of each other with great precision. It's close to 750 feet wide and more than 450 feet high. To this day, we're still not able to explain how it was constructed, and it's quite difficult to understand the internal design as well. On the inside, the pyramid has no similarities to the other pyramids, and, despite popular belief, there were no mummies found in any of them. If you think that's a bit weird, wait for the next one. There are absolutely no hieroglyphs found in any of the pyramids, and that goes both ways. What do I mean? There are also no pyramids, or anything that resembles a pyramid, in any hieroglyphs either. Mr. Thomas believes that the pyramids were created hundreds of thousands of years before the Egyptians by a civilization that went extinct. Speaking of civilizations, in his book he even mentions the Greeks. He claims that in Greece, there was another ancient race of people that went extinct as well. He claims they were extremely tall with blue eyes and blonde hair, and had access to advanced technology that the Greeks couldn't have known about in their prime. Now, before we drift too far away from the stone blocks, let's talk about another mystery, the temple in Baalbek, Lebanon, and its ginormous foundation blocks. Those stones, which make up the Heliopolis, were also used for the temple in Rome. The foundations of the temples are made of 900-ton trilithon stones, and according to the author, this is proof that there must have been a lost ancient civilization with advanced technology. Now, most archaeologists claim that those stones were made by the Romans. However, there's no evidence to support that. The Romans didn't have the technological equipment to make the stones or lift them. So, you might think, what if they just made them in that place right then and there? Well, those stones were also lifted 30 feet high and were placed next to each other with mathematical precision. And let's not forget about the blocks on top of the Heliopolis in Lebanon, which weigh about 800 tons each. But wait till you hear the next one. The Romans don't even credit themselves for these stones. They claim that they built up the sides, but they don't take credit for the extraordinarily large and heavy foundation stones. The author also makes an interesting point about the distance between the Roman capital and Baalbek in Lebanon. Why would the Romans build the world's largest monolithic stones in such a remote area, and so far away from their capital, and never take credit for it? Well, folks, it's a mystery to me. Now, let's move on to the most intriguing enigma, Easter Island, which is located in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, or nowhere, if you will. The author questions how people found it or even settled in such a remote island that long ago. One of the signifiers of Easter Island are the Moai statues, and the mystery surrounding who they depict and why. What's an even bigger question is how they were created, moved, and positioned in the places they were found. According to this declassified document, Easter Island was part of the now lost continent named Mu, and it was sunk in the Pacific Ocean in a disastrous cataclysm that happened during one of those pole shifts. The continent of Mu, according to the book, was as big as South America, and what we now call Easter Island is just what's left of that continent. The author also believes that this is what happened with the lost city of Atlantis as well. Plato is even quoted about this, saying that the whole city of Atlantis sunk miles beneath the waves within just a day. Even though the whole story sounds very intriguing and makes some interesting points, we know that, scientifically speaking, a cataclysmic pole shift causing entire civilizations to go extinct isn't possible.
There's this interesting ancient site near St. Louis, Missouri, that a lot of people don't know about. It's called Cahokia, and it used to be a huge city with up to 20,000 people living there back in the 11th century. It's full of these massive earthen mounds that were built by hand, and the biggest one is still there today, at the Cahokia Mound State Historic Site. Even though we don't know everything about this civilization, researchers have been able to piece together some information from the remains they've found. For starters, they found some pretty old teeth at this site. After studying their appearance and structure, scientists suggest that a lot of different indigenous groups lived there. About a third of them came from other areas in the middle of the continent, which they figured out by studying the different levels of various substances in the teeth. And get this, the way the mounds are arranged shows that this was actually a planned-out city, not just a bunch of villages grouped together. The rulers lived on top of the mounds, while everyone else lived in other structures. It's amazing to think that they were doing things like farming, hunting, logging, pottery, and weaving, all within this one giant city. Right in the middle of Cahokia, there was this giant mound that was about 100 feet tall, and around it, there was this huge wooden fence. Inside the fence was the city center, which had a big open space called a plaza. Archaeologists think that the plaza was designed to represent the 4 cardinal directions of the world. It was like the people who built it wanted to create a place that was in harmony with the universe. The center of the city was where they held ceremonies and events, and it was such a big deal that people from outside Cahokia would come to be a part of them too. What became of this city? Hard to tell. Some people think that the reason it fell apart is that they cut down too many trees and the land got all messed up. Other scientists believe that's not true because the soil was still in pretty good shape after the city was gone. The Europeans were not even around at that time, so they couldn't have influenced the downfall of Cahokia either. There's also one theory that suggests there were fights with other communities that caused the city to collapse. These days, there are over 65 preserved mounds, and you can even climb the steps of the tallest one. The best part is that local authorities are thinking of making it a national park, so you should totally plan to visit before it gets too crowded. Mohenjo Daro is another lost ancient city that's still surrounded by mystery. Located in modern-day Pakistan, it was a city that flourished during the Bronze Age, and it was extremely advanced for its time. It had things like water systems and fancy architecture that other cities didn't have back then. Despite these features, it's not as well known as other ancient cities, like those in Egypt or Mesopotamia. What's even weirder is that at some point, the city was abandoned, and no one knows why. Archaeologists found the city in 1911, but it took a while for them to realize how important it was. Eventually, they uncovered a lot of really interesting things about the city, like its advanced sanitation system. Excavations uncovered over 700 wells, as well as private baths and a large communal bath. Remarkably, even private homes had toilets, and waste was efficiently disposed of through a citywide sewage system. They also had a lot of trade connections and made some really beautiful objects, like pottery, jewelry, and figurines that were sold all over the region. Despite its amazing culture and knowledge, scientists have yet to figure out why the city was abandoned. Some people think changes in the nearby river might have had something to do with it. The writings that the people of Mohenjo Daro left behind are still a complex code, even for the most skilled specialists, making it even harder to piece together their history. Have you heard of the lost city of Kolmanskop? It used to be a small settlement in the Namib Desert. Legend has it that it got its name from a man named Coleman who got stuck in the local dunes and was never seen again. But that's not the interesting part. In 1908, a railway worker found a shiny stone and showed it to the chief railway foreman, who turned out to be a hobby mineralogist. They discovered it was a diamond, and soon, Kolmanskop became the richest town in Africa and one of the richest places in the world. It had luxurious stone houses, a school, a hospital, and even an ice factory to produce ice for fridges. The hospital had the first X-ray machine in southern Africa, which was supposedly used to check if workers were illegally swallowing diamonds. Its popularity began to decline in the late 1920s when another diamond-rich location was discovered nearby. Most of the inhabitants soon began to flee the city in search of a better life, leaving the buildings abandoned. In 1938, all machinery was taken south and the town was left to the desert. The last inhabitant left Kolmanskop between 1956 and 1960. The hot climate and low humidity have preserved the structures over time, and tourists can now visit this desert ghost town. You've surely heard about this next ancient city, Machu Picchu. It's this incredible ancient location in Peru. It stretches across a huge piece of land in the Andes Mountains and sits high above sea level. It's even considered one of the wonders of the modern world. But here's the thing. Scientists aren't exactly sure what it was used for. It could have supported up to 750 people, but there aren't a lot of human clues left behind. Some people think it was more of a spiritual or ceremonial place, while others believe it may have been like a fancy spa retreat for the nobles. The extensive terraces might mean it was used for crop testing, or as a trading hub. And there's even a theory that it was used as a prison because they found a cell-like area too. It's amazing that even today, archaeologists and historians are still puzzled about how it was built. Did you know that they probably didn't even use wheels for transportation? And those massive granite rocks were somehow pushed up the steep Andean mountains, even though most of them weighed a lot. Some historians think that hundreds of people worked together to push each rock up the peak. The huge stones at Machu Picchu are also so close together that you can't see any cracks between them. It's pretty cool because it also makes the area safe during earthquakes, which is important since Peru is a shaky country. But how did the stones stay put during all those quakes? They actually move a little bit, but then they go back to their original spot, almost like they're dancing. Some people think wet wooden wedges were used to keep them in place, but that doesn't really add up, considering how big the structures are. Locals back then also seem to have built Machu Picchu without using any pack animals or iron tools. They had to sculpt and put everything together using mostly their hands. Plus, the citadel is built on a fault, so they had to move a bunch of stone and earth to make it flat. Scientists also think that the real construction is actually underground because of the deep foundations and drainage system. In fact, there's a hidden water system that was just recently discovered using 3D scanning. They didn't even use mortar to put the granite blocks together. They were so precise that you can't even fit a sheet of paper between them. One theory suggests that people that lived there used stone tools made of a harder material than the stone they were cutting.
Now, let's assume that another species, whether humanoid or dolphin-like, could have existed millions of years ago. How do we find their traces? There was a Doctor Who episode about a non-human industrial civilization on Earth that existed long before us. These reptiles, called Silurians, were forced deep underground by a catastrophic rise of temperatures on Earth, and there they thrived for centuries. That inspired scientists to create the so-called Silurian hypothesis. If there was an advanced civilization before us, we should find their traces somewhere. Well, let's try. Climatologist Gavin Schmidt and astrophysicist Adam Frank decided to dive into this themselves. Like us, any technologically advanced civilization would be hungry for energy, so they looked for global effects that would leave a widespread mark. For example, hints of large-scale industrial processes, like plants and factories, and their leftovers. Then comes the question of how long these civilizations would last. If they existed for a long time, we should look for long-lasting signs, like residues from burning fossil fuels, mass extinctions, synthetic chemicals not found in nature, and even traces of nuclear fission. Basically, we should search for the same kinds of things that humans are currently leaving behind as evidence of our activities. Unfortunately, this evidence isn't that easy to find. Let's imagine an unsettling scenario if humanity suddenly disappeared. Even though it seems like we've left a lot of changes on our planet, the future civilization millions of years from now would struggle to find any remnants of our existence. Why? Well, our planet has existed for 4.5 billion years. Complex life on Earth has existed for more than 400 million years. Compared to that, our industrial period only lasted around 300 years, and we haven't left any significant traces. Our record of Earth's history is full of gaps, especially the further back you look. The fossil record captures only some things, being very selective and incomplete. On average, one fossil emerges every 10,000 years, and dinosaur footprints are even rarer. Mountains rise, oceans change, and plate tectonics can easily wipe out evidence of entire civilizations. After a couple of million years, chances are any physical signs of a civilization would disappear. In order to find at least something, we have to look for things like odd sediment patterns or unusual isotopic ratios. Also, fossils mostly form in water, leaving us in the dark about creatures on land or in the jungles. So even if there was a technologically advanced society millions of years in the past, and even if they were far more advanced than us, we might struggle to find any clues of its existence. Frank and Schmidt try to understand how we could ever hope to spot signs of them. Discovering actual cities would be the ultimate proof of a Silurian-style civilization on Earth. But Adam Frank isn't too optimistic. Even now, our cities cover less than 3% of the surface, making it easy to miss ancient city ruins. Whether a city survives over tens of millions of years depends on whether the land around it is sinking, getting locked into a rock, or rising, getting worn away by rain and wind. So places like the French Quarter in New Orleans might have a better shot of making it into the geologic record than, say, Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco. When it comes to finding artifacts, the odds are pretty slim as well. No prehistoric iPhone would survive millions of years, fancy glass or not. Finding their fossilized remnants might be a bit more promising, but it's still tricky. Considering modern humans have only been around for about 100,000 years, it's quite possible that we might overlook any traces of an earlier advanced species. There is one thing, though. We could stumble upon their traces in rocks. Our current chaotic era might leave a distinct mark on the Earth's geological history, especially since we're basically experiencing PTM 2.0. I'll get to that in a moment. So they try to look at the changes in the carbon cycle. Humans have been releasing a lot of fossil carbon since the 18th century. This leaves a special mark in the carbon isotope ratio, like a signature that shows the difference between carbon in living things, such as seashells, and carbon in lifeless volcanic rock. Scientists also look for signs in the way sediments are arranged. Large coastal deltas might mean that there were bigger rivers made by folks in this hypothetical civilization. Traces of nitrogen could suggest big-scale farming, where they used a lot of fertilizer. Spikes in metal levels in the sediment could mean runoff from heavy industries. Of course, a single find like that wouldn't tell us anything. Schmidt says the key is to look for multiple signs together. Without clear artifacts, the uniqueness of an event might show in various clues rather than a set of changes linked to a single cause. On a quest for Silurian-style clues, scientists even decided to check the Moon. Some astronomers find it surprising that no one has looked into this before. They even joked about the possibility of dinosaurs building rockets and leaving traces on the Moon or other celestial bodies. These astronomers think that Earth-like planets tend to erase signs of civilizations on their surfaces. So they're exploring the wild notion that these beings might have been space travelers. In that case, remnants of their technology, known as technosignatures, could be lurking not only on our Moon, but also on asteroids, or even buried on Mars. There they might endure for millions or even billions of years. Unfortunately, so far, despite digging into the past 380 million years and examining all suspicious events, the researchers haven't found a clear match for a technological civilization. They don't give up, though. Frank calls for more investigation. For example, we could study how modern industrial chemicals stick around in ocean sediments. This, he believes, could help us identify similar chemical traces in the Earth's history. If there are no traces, why do we even bother to find something like that? This research is based on Schmidt and Frank's recent papers. They were delving into the Anthropocene. It's the proposed epoch dominated by human activities on Earth. It's full of these things called hyperthermals. They're prehistoric events when temperatures on Earth sharply increased over a relatively short time. They're like extreme heat waves from the past. A great example of this is the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, or PETM for short. It happened around 55.5 million years ago and saw a rapid rise in global temperatures. Over 200,000 years, the average temperature on Earth jumped from about 9 to 14 degrees Fahrenheit. We study these hyperthermals to understand how they occurred, from natural causes or human activities. So, these hyperthermals sparked the genesis of Frank and Schmidt's research. To study them, scientists started examining chemical signals and tracers left in rocks. When doing that, Schmidt and Frank uncovered some eerie parallels between all the climate issues we have today and past periods of rapid temperature shifts. There's a close similarity between the Pedum and other hyperthermal events. So all this work isn't just about solving a historical mystery. Understanding our impact on the environment can guide us to finding better ways to live in harmony with the planet and avoid becoming a forgotten species in the future. Our Milky Way is filled with lots of planets that could be just right for life, but we don't know if there are other civilizations out there. Earth is the only place we know of with living beings. About 200 years ago, people wondered if there might be civilizations on Mars. Back then, it was a real question, but once we got pictures from space probes, we decided there wasn't any evidence for it, and that idea got stuck in our minds. Now, it's not even considered a valid topic for serious science. It's seen as kind of silly. But no one has set clear limits on what could have happened on our own planet a really long time ago. So, even if there is no proof, we shouldn't throw away the possibility. Don't forget, it took humanity a while to recognize dinosaurs. Maybe Silurians are just patiently waiting for their time.
It's the first day of your long-awaited trip to the Amazon forest. You flew all the way to South America. More specifically, you landed in the city of Manaus. It's the heart of the Brazilian Amazon. So far, you've traveled by air, car, and now water. You are on a tiny boat, moving through the dark waters of the Amazon River. Yes, the river is also called the Amazon. And just FYI, it's the second longest river in the world. It loses only to the Nile River in Egypt. The Amazon sprawls for an impressive 2,700 square miles, beginning in Peru and ending only when it meets the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Brazil. To get a closer look at the forest, you decide to start by exploring it by boat. First up, you watch some piranha fishing. You can even try to catch one yourself if you like. As you may know, piranhas are carnivorous fish that inhabit the Amazon River, so it might not be your best option to go swimming in these waters. One of the most emblematic species of alligators present in the Amazon River basin is the broad-snouted caiman. It looks pretty much like a regular alligator, except for the fact that it has a yellow chin. Your guide leaves the boat and searches the water to show you a caiman up close. He also tells you of another legendary creature that lives in the dark waters of the river, the pink dolphin. Lucky you get to witness a family of pink dolphins showing their fins near your boat. They look magical from the place where you're sitting. You've probably never known dolphins can be pink, huh? After a few mesmerizing moments, you discover that the dolphin's pink color is nothing but an illusion. The animals are originally pinkish-gray, but due to the brown colors of the Amazon River, they look vivid pink when you stare at them from above. Your guide tells you that the pink dolphin is a central character of Brazilian folklore. Locals believe that the pink dolphins can turn into humans and wander off into towns at night. You get off your boat near one of the entrances to the forest. Now you're going to continue your trip on foot. Your guide says that you are venturing into very dangerous terrain. The Amazon is home to some of the creepiest species of wildlife on the globe. But don't worry, we'll get to see a lot of them today. You've come prepared, of course. Bug spray, a raincoat, and your sharp eyes. Inside the jungle, you need to be alert at all times. You may have heard legends of the anaconda, a snake that can swallow animals as big as a cow in one go. Sorry to break it to you, but those are not just legends. Reptiles like these do actually exist. They live deep in the jungle. It right there, moving between the trees. Is it a spider? The so-called Goliath bird-eater is a monster spider. Its legs can grow up to a foot in length, and the spider itself can weigh around 6 ounces. It's also known as the king of tarantulas. You shouldn't get too close, of course. It's not venomous to humans, but its bite can surely sting. As its name suggests, the Goliath bird-eater can even eat birds, as long as they are smaller than it is. Up next, you run into another species of spider that draws your attention. This one is so tiny that you almost don't see it. It's known by the popular name of the decoy spider. You see one of its creations, a gigantic spider built by the tiny sea closet spider in order to scare off large predators. This is as amazing as it is creepy. A spider that uses the remains of other insects and dry leaves to create the image of a large spider on its web. If it fools predators, perfect! But to us humans, this work of art looks almost endearing. Who knew there were artists in the arachnid world? Near a small lake, you witness a unique scene. A large snake is slowly slithering its way toward a lizard that is resting on a rock. The lizard seems obvious to the presence of the dangerous reptile, but right as the snake is preparing to attack, the lizard flies the scene in its iconic way. The so-called basilisk lizard is famous for its ability to walk on water, or rather run across the water. This isn't an illusion, just a matter of balancing. The small lizard moves its legs on top of the water very fast, while its long tail serves as a counterweight. I wish I could do that. If you've ever wondered what a frog looks like on the inside, you've come to the right place. Right in front of your eyes, there is a rare local species of frog. It's known as the glass frog. This species of amphibian has a type of transparent skin that is completely see-through. In other words, you can see the frog's interior with astounding clarity. It's as if you had X-ray vision. Moving on with your journey, soon you come across a pond. Floating on its water is probably the biggest water lily you've ever seen in your life. These huge plants are also known as the Victoria Amazonica. They can measure up to 8 feet across and hold the weight of a grown-up person. But I wouldn't recommend trying to climb on it if I were you. Just cause, you know, it's the Amazon forest we're talking about. The wildlife here is amazing, but the forest itself is also a sight. There are over 80,000 species of plants and trees grown in the Amazon rainforest. In fact, you can find 10% of all the world's wildlife in this jungle. An estimated 400 billion trees grow on the gigantic area the forest occupies. Of course, this place is bound to be biodiverse, right? You won't be able to witness this phenomenon during your trip, but your guide tells you about a unique species of tree that is famous for being able to walk. Yep, you've heard correctly. There are walking trees in the Amazon rainforest. They don't have legs or anything like that, but they do move around in search of better lighting conditions. The Amazon canopy is so thick that only 1% of sunlight can reach the forest floor. Because of this, some trees end up getting less sunlight than others. The so-called walking palm trees seem to be adapted to this situation. They grow new roots, which helps them move for 1 to 2 inches per day. They can walk up to 65 feet per year. Maybe that's what inspired John Ronald Reuel Tolkien to create ants, huh? Those are pretty similar tree beings that roam freely around the world. I kid you not, it's not only wildlife that inhabits the Amazon. Actually, over 30 million people live in the forest. And there are also ancient settlements that scientists believe to have been thriving there. And I'm not talking about El Dorado, that's just a myth. But in 2018, a groundbreaking study showed that up to 1 million people probably inhabited the Amazon between 1250 and 1500 CE. Can you imagine that? Working alongside local indigenous people, researchers from the University of Florida found several mounds in the Amazon. Besides these mounds, they also discovered interesting ditches and geoglyphs. After mapping all of these recurring mounds, scientists understood that this was a sign of an ancient settlement. They found remnants of carefully designed walls centered around plazas. This could only mean that these ancient cities were big and could host hundreds of thousands of people. These findings brought back the idea that the Amazon could have been home to thriving civilizations way before the Europeans arrived there. But rather than cities drenched in gold, they were simply well-developed agricultural societies.
This just in, the world's oldest pyramid was built during the last ice age. And I'm not even talking about Egypt. I'm saying our ancestors might have spewed a 27,000-year-old pyramid in West Java. Gunung Padang is not exactly shouting pyramid. It's more of a mound with huge scattered stones tossed all over it. But local people seem to revere it, and they have for centuries. It wasn't until recently that the Indonesian authorities decided to excavate a bit deeper to see what all the fuss was about. They ended up finding the remains of a human settlement. It was rather unexpected, since the mound is pretty high up. This excavation could only prove there were humans in the area as far back as 45 BCE, which sounds reasonable. It was up to an Indonesian geologist named Donny Hillman to prove that Gunung Padang is the world's first pyramid. He used all sorts of new technology to support his claim. Our guy used carbon dating, which digs deep into the earth and takes whole chunks of soil. He found layers and layers of constructions, like he was digging up Rome and finding ancient buildings buried in the ground. His research proved that there had been caverns and even rooms down there, which could only mean one thing: humans. As for the rocks located up in the mound, they were most likely strategically placed by the people who lived there back in the day. They needed a place to meditate, so they arranged things in a harmonious way. Their smooth surfaces wouldn't be the result of years of erosion, but the works of great sculptures, the Michelangelos of their day, let's say. If this is all for real, then human civilizations began way before we think they did. Our ancestors, the Paleolithic humans, didn't have what it took to be considered a civilization, especially not the tools and knowledge to build pyramids. They needed a lot of masonry skills, which weren't all that available during the last ice age. His peers don't share this view, though. They could believe Hillman's theory if he had found evidence such as charcoal and bone fragments, but he didn't. Flint Dibble, another archaeologist, says that without concrete evidence of human activity, there's no proof of an actual pyramid. In this case, all the data proves is that the soil in the mound dates back to 27,000 years ago. He thinks the rocks on top of the mound just slipped down the hill, like rocks normally do. Only a complex society would have managed to build a stepped pyramid like they claim it was. But according to Bill Farley, an American archaeologist, there's just no reason to believe there were any settlements in Indonesia during the last ice age. Now, just so you know, the oldest known ancient society with this kind of knowledge is probably 11,000 years old and used to occupy the region of modern-day Turkey. Take a look, Turkey's Göbekli Tepe. It's also not a pyramid, but it's the oldest monolithic construction made by humans. Back in the Neolithic period, a lot of people settled there, and there are proofs for it. For example, the walls there are covered in ancient drawings of clothing and wild animals. Until recently, the title of the world's oldest pyramid went to a three-sided construction known as the Djoser Pyramid in Egypt. Djoser is located just a few miles south of the Giza complex in a town called Saqqara. It made its way to popular culture more than once. In the 18th century, it became a common feature in European paintings. Young men from the cultural elite did a grand tour around the world, and Saqqara was at the top of their list. It was also featured in the video game Assassin's Creed, with a digital representation way more accurate than many historical drawings of the thing. That was kind of a big deal in ancient Egypt, to build pyramids for kings to spend their afterlives. And if you thought the Khufu pyramid was the oldest one in the world, well, Djoser was built 70 years ahead of that time. The development of new technology has allowed archaeologists to make groundbreaking discoveries, and a new, or should I say ancient pyramid in South America might win the title in dispute. It turns out that pyramids were also pretty fashionable in the Americas in the old days. Among them are the iconic pyramids of Guatemala's Tikal Temple Complex, the same ones that appeared in Star Wars No. 4. But to find the oldest pyramid in the Americas, one would have to travel to Peru. Deep in the Peruvian desert, archaeologists stumbled upon a sprawling ancient metropolis known as Caral. At first, researchers believed that the settlement was pretty recent, since the site was way too complex for ancient technology to handle it. As we said, Caral is a desert town, like Las Vegas, but without all the hoopla. This means no easy access to water, and for cities like these to thrive, they need a considerable irrigation system, which leads us back to complex technologies. The Peruvians surprised us all with this new discovery. This site was huge, filled with an amphitheater, houses, and religious buildings. The whole thing probably sprawled through 370 acres. And when scientists went to test their initial hypothesis using radiocarbon dating, they found that the city probably sprung around 2027 BCE. On the site, archaeologists found 6 pyramids that could possibly predate the one in Saqqara. As far as they know, both civilizations coexisted in the same time period, in opposite parts of the world. But since researchers can't pinpoint the exact age of Caral's pyramids, it's pretty hard to guess which civilization completed their pyramid first. If only we had a crystal ball. Now, it just so happens that the shape of a pyramid is something that nature is able to produce all on its own, leaving us modern-day humans a bit confused. A classic example is the Japanese side of Yaonagani, which also goes by the name of Japan's Atlantis. The entire monument is about the size of 5 football fields and the height of a 5-story building. Explorers and scientists believe that Yaonagani dates back to 10,000 years ago. For Japan's top marine geologist, Professor Masaki Kimura, Yaonagani is the heritage of a lost civilization. Kimura has dived into exploring the ruins over 100 times over the past 10 years. To him, there are clear signs of human activity down there. Check out this triangular-shaped pool on the monument's surface. Kimura thinks it's actual proof of humans, because this triangle-shaped concave is a historical symbol of water fountains in the region. As it happens with a lot of these cases, not all scientists are convinced the same. For many, Yaonagani is probably the result of thousands of years of erosion, and the fact that the monument is composed of one massive rock leads them to believe it is not really human-made. Sure, these huge basalt columns may look like the ruins of a palace, but they're most likely the result of the intense volcanic activity in the region. And speaking of natural formations that really look like a human made it, a pyramid on Mars has been a hot topic lately. Humans have been keenly trying to prove that there is life on Mars for quite some time. But some are stretching it really far, saying that little green or gray people built a pyramid on the planet to try and build their own civilization. This picture was taken over a decade ago by the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, the MRO, but it started to resurface recently. It shows what looks like a 3-sided pyramid. Some people claim that the smooth side of the pyramid could only be the effect of otherworldly work. Then science comes along and explains that Mars is home to one of the deepest canyon systems in the whole solar system. The so-called pyramid is located in what is known as the Kandor-Chasma region. This Martian region has a bunch of similar formations that are nothing more than the result of erosion. Nothing supernatural going on there, apparently.